A centrist group's primary election strategy. READI 2.0 awards announced, plus older and disabled Hoosiers on a waiting list, and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending April 12th, 2024.
Indiana Week in Review is made possible by the supporters of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, billboards from a political centrist group are urging Hoosier Democrats to vote in this year's Republican primary. The message from Recenter Indiana is going up on roadsides in Northwest, Central, and Southwest Indiana. Recenter Indiana, formed 2 years ago, is made up of moderate Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. Here's board member Linda Heitzman.
Our mission is to try to realign and recenter politics in Indiana and get away from the extremes, because we really believe that most people politically are in the middle.
The billboards urging people who usually take a Democratic ballot in the primary to vote in the Republican races this spring are focused on the open governor's race. Heitzman, a Democrat herself, says the next governor will likely be decided in the primary.
So at least I know that my vote will have some impact on the election.
Recenter Indiana will also launch a social media campaign around the issue. Can Democrats voting in the GOP primary have an impact on the race? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, Oseye Boyd, editor-in-chief of Mirror Indy, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting Statehouse Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Mike, can this be influential in this six-way primary?
You know, if there's a mass of people that do this, it's the close parallel is when this was tried in 2008 for different purposes and different motivations. Remember, Rush Limbaugh had Operation Chaos late in that primary between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Republicans were supposed to switch sides in states like Indiana that were late in that primary because it went so deep, almost right to convention. And it had mixed results. It really, if you're a political guy running the campaigns like I was back then, or a county chairman, it screwed up the voter list. Like the way because you couldn't target people anymore because you had Republicans pulling Democrat ballots and it changed their voting score, and it was a mess. Anyway, that was my headache and reaction to it. This is a solution that comes from the broader problem, and that is people have left the parties. And so in America today, in Indiana today, one thing I've always said is we need to be a lot more partisan as a country. And that sounds insane in the hotly partisan, toxically partisan environment that we find ourselves in, but so many people have left their party affiliation because they're repulsed by both parties, and fair enough in modern times, but you get the moderate candidate by moderating the party by participating in it, not by gaming the system to try to take voters from over here and put them over here where they don't belong.
And do you think a lot of Democrats are going to do this?
No, I don't actually. And on top of that, I think the idea of recentering and particularly cutting out the extremes of the Republican Party is a good idea.
For sure.
But having said that, I reject two of the premises that they advance here. First, that a Democrat cannot be elected governor of the state of Indiana. And secondly, that there's a moderate candidate among those yahoos. Who is the moderate candidate?
I think you can make a compelling argument that Brad Chambers is the moderate candidate.
Based on his ads? If you're not
I think based on his policy ideas,
well, if you're not a political groupie and you're just watching what's on camera, there is not one tinker's damn worth of difference among all of the ones on TV. And I think that it repulses people, in fact, because, they want to demagogue the issue of immigration. They don't want to solve it. They want to demagogue it. They want to make up facts. They want to show who loves Donald Trump the most. Donald Trump, when you're talking about the chaos and partisanship, he's responsible for the fact that there's chaos in this country because Roe v. Wade was overturned by his hand.
And all calm waters before that happened.
Well, it wasn't calm, but it is nothing like it is now. And that is responsible. The responsibility for that is right at his feet. And yet they want to embrace him. It's incredible.
I want to ask about this, which is, we don't when you register to vote in Indiana, you do not register with a party, unlike a lot of other states. And so people see the primary ballot process as the way you register, because it's public record. And so is that going to be a problem that a lot of, if this group wants to have this success and have a bunch of Democrats vote in the Republican primary, is the problem they're going to encounter more than anything else be Democrats who go, well, I don't want to be on record as voting in a Republican primary?
Well, sure. There are certainly going to be some people like that, and there'll be a small subset also who maybe might be thinking of running for something in the future, and they don't want to put that in jeopardy with the 2 primary rule and whether they'd be able to run as a Democrat in the future. So those are certainly considerations. But I would think those are a small amount of the Democrats who would do that. I think most people, I mean, I know a lot of people, and frankly, not just Democrats, who have occasionally crossed over to have a say in the other primary because they feel like that's the only time their voice is going to be heard. I don't think that's particularly a new thing, although to make it like the center of a campaign for just the governor's race is pretty fascinating.
And there are reasons to vote in other primaries too, to your point, which is, you know, increasingly, there aren't a lot of competitive races in primaries. And, you know, you look at this year in the Republican primaries across the state, obviously with governor, but also with, you know, congressional races in the 3rd, the 5th, the 6th, the 8th. You have, open competitive primaries. At the state house level, not quite as many this year. There's a few in both parties. A few. Not like the concerted effort we saw in 2022. So if you're a Democrat, say in Marion County, there are not a lot of competitive races on your primary ballot. Is that reason enough to go, well, yeah, why not pull a Republican one?
I don't know if there's reason enough, but it could be someone's reason to actually have their voice heard and get some representation for themselves and their district. I do think this campaign is very interesting. When I first read it, I had to read it again. So I was like, oh, center, I thought it was going to say something totally different. So it's kind of radical in this idea of voting Republican to move things farther to the left versus the right. But I don't think it's going to happen immediately. I do think it's something that you're going to have to do this campaign over and over for people to actually understand and get it. It's not a one-time thing. Yeah. Just like moving to the right has not been a one time. It's been a gradual move to the extreme.
That's a good point. All right, time now for viewer feedback. Each week we pose an unscientific online poll question, and this week's question is: should Democrats vote in the Republican primary to influence Indiana's race for governor? A, yes, or B, no. Last week, we asked you whether the General Assembly is likely to make the state's abortion ban more or less restrictive in the 2025 session. 64% of you say it'll be more restrictive, 14% say less restrictive, and 22% think there will be no change. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. The second phase of Governor Eric Holcomb's READI program, a regional economic development initiative, is set to generate $11 billion in investment across the state. The latest $500 million in state funding was awarded this week to 15 regions, covering the entire state. The regions will receive between $10 and $45 million for capital and infrastructure projects. Holcomb says in this round of funding, regions could have received up to $75 million, but the proposals were all competitive enough that the state wanted to spread the money around as much as possible.
But I think we very methodically arrived at what was not just fair, but that was effective in spurring local economic growth that's going to get to population growth and addressing talent scarcity.
Many of Holcomb's would-be successors in the governor's race have criticized his economic development approach. They've said it's a top-down strategy that ignores local input. Holcomb waves aside those criticisms as ignorant.
They should get busy doing the work, and they would see just how much local input drives the day. This is a true partnership.
The money will be dispersed and spent over the next several years. Ann DeLaney, will this be Eric Holcomb's most lasting legacy?
I don't think so. I think really the thing that he should be remembered for is recognizing that we have a public health crisis in this state and actually starting to address it. I think that's the more lasting legacy. This is, this is nice for the communities. It's the community's idea, but whether there's a swimming pool or a park in a particular community isn't going to bring a Fortune 500 company in, okay? It's not. It makes the quality of life a little bit better for those communities, and that's not a bad thing.
No, but increasingly that's what companies are looking at,
Yeah,
because everything else is starting to normalize, right? Everybody's lowering taxes everywhere,
yeah,
except for
the taxes, the incentives are all there.
Right.
The difference is education. And if we had more college graduates, we'd have more businesses coming, and instead we have fewer. And we have kids failing in third grade for reading. Those are the kinds of things that companies that are forward-thinking look at.
But I would also argue that that programs like this can keep more people here who do have college degrees by making these places more attractive.
I think it makes it more attractive for the people living there, and that is not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing that, but I'm saying if you're talking about a legacy, I think addressing public health, which is a crisis in this state, was a very important thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would also put that number one.
Sure.
I think that's true. But in terms of, we're getting to that time where we're going to start talking about Eric Holcomb's legacy. Is this at least high up on the list?
Sure. This infrastructure improved hard assets are, of course, going to be a part of your legacy because you're looking at it, and you'll remember the guy that opened I-69 and finished it, or built any of these projects in these communities now multiple times around the state. Certainly, health is on the list, but it gets lost in
the COVID stuff.
At the time, at the time that passed, it was shocking that, like nationally, like the governor would have other governors calling him in Democrat states saying, "How'd you do that? It's too hot here. I can't get something like that through my legislature." So that's certainly on the list. But I think the legacy will be where he dedicated most of his time and resources. That was on economic development. Huge success stories there with the breaking record after record for outside investment, infrastructure. READI certainly in that mix.
We've seen economic development be almost a wedge issue among Republican primary candidates for governor, with Brad Chambers, of course, being the candidate going, hey, no, we're doing a really good job. Look at all this investment we're generating. And the others going, mostly related to the LEAP project, but generally speaking, the approach you've taken is wrong, wrong, wrong. Do those messages work when you have announcements like this?
I'm not sure they work. For one, I think they need to do what Governor Holcomb said, do their homework, actually do their homework and see what's happening. Go to the areas and see what people are talking about when it comes to LEAP especially. So I think it's just become talking points of we're parroting each other because we're trying to attack the current governor to show what he's done or not done that we think is right or wrong. And you can have different ideas. That's the whole point, right? Is you're not going to be Eric Holcomb. You're going to have different ideas when you come into office. That's the point. But that doesn't mean he's wrong. It's just your way of doing things. Now, will it be better? We'll have to wait and see who is the new governor. But I don't think that necessarily they're going to find something that's really necessarily better than Eric Holcomb.
I bet they'll be at the ribbon cutting. I got a prediction.
It's like build Indiana. They're all there.
I want to ask about the future of READI. We've seen 2 doses of $500 million investment. The first one was federal money. This one, though, was state dollars. I think the budget's going to be a lot tighter in 2025, but do lawmakers continue to put major dollars into this program?
I don't know if they're going to be able to get it through in the next budget. I think, when they're talking about cutting taxes to set aside a third round of massive amounts of money to basically improve quality of place and get people to want to stay and live here. And we've got a Medicaid problem. We're talking about cutting taxes. We got to figure out how to fund roads for the long term. I think READI is probably going to drop down on the priority list.
And to be fair, I suppose, even if you take a cycle off, I mean, the money from READI 1 hasn't been finished spent. They haven't finished spending that yet. This new money will be spent over the next 4 or 5 years plus. There's another $250 million from the Lilly Foundation that's going to be spent again, on more targeted, it's blight reduction and arts and culture initiatives, sort of growing out of READI. So yeah, there's a lot of spending left to do that I think lawmakers could also go, whoa, let's spend all that first, and then we can look at it again.
And then you won't remember it, and we can go on.
Hoosiers with disabilities or who want to age in place may have a harder time accessing services under an important Medicaid waiver. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports the Family and Social Services Administration will implement a wait list for the aged and disabled waiver as part of its effort to address the state's Medicaid shortfall.
FSSA recently announced the waiver reached the maximum capacity of slots. In July, the agency will have 5,000 additional slots that can be split between the aged and disabled waiver and another home and community-based services waiver. Kim Dotson is the CEO of the ARC of Indiana. She says the wait for services could already be as long as 2 years, and the number of people on the wait list already surpasses the total number of slots that will be available in July.
Every week they go without services. Every day they go without services could be life-threatening.
Dotson says waitlists are common, but in recent years, the aged and disabled waiver hasn't had one. She says she hopes the waitlist isn't around for long, but that depends on efforts from the General Assembly and the governor.
Niki Kelly, is this the reality of trying to rein in spending on the Medicaid program?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of it. But the irony about it is that some of these people who need these services, their only other option is going to have to go to a nursing home, which we know costs the state more than the services that they would need to stay in their home.
And that the state is trying to move away from.
Exactly. And so, I mean, it's like this vicious cycle we're in where, you know, you don't want to spend the money over here in this funding stream, but if you block those services, then you're going to spend it over here on this funding stream. And so, yeah, I mean, the lawmakers have a huge task ahead of them in the budget to try to still serve Hoosiers who need these services, but, you know, acknowledge the fact that the state budget is not, you know, we don't got a tree in the back, you know, printing money.
We know this conversation is coming. It's already started. It's been going on for over a year now as lawmakers have seen the cost of the Medicaid program expand significantly. But the impact so far that we've seen has been on families with medically complex children and folks who qualify for the aged and disabled waiver. Some of the most vulnerable people in the state of Indiana. Is that going to be the real problem when we get to session and have the total funding conversation about Medicaid?
Yes. To Niki's point, it's a cycle. One hand is doing something and the other hand doesn't know what you're doing. There needs to be a comprehensive actual look at Medicaid to see what can we do to actually cut costs to not harm people. I feel like so many times things are done on the backs of poor people, on the backs of those who are the most vulnerable. We need to cut Medicaid spending, yes, but how do we do that without increasing the harm done to these families who have no one else to depend on, who this is how they survive? How are you going to tell a mom who has to take care of her disabled child that you have to be on the wait list for 2 years for these services? It's borderline cruel to a certain extent. So how do we fix this though? Instead of arguing about what's right or wrong, which way to go, how are we going to fix it? And I think we haven't really got to the level of fixing. The conversation is always pointing to, well, we need to cut spending. We do need to do, like you said, there's no tree in the back with money. But how do we actually fix this long term? What's comprehensive? We talk about quality of life with the governor's READI plan. That's quality of life for people who are waiting on Medicaid.
Oftentimes, these sorts of funding conversations that we're going to go into in the next budget seem to happen in a vacuum, and you sometimes it's easy to forget about the individual impact, the face that's attached to these dollars you're trying to cut. Because of the trickling effect that this has had, because of the miss on the forecast, create this reaction of, oh, okay, maybe we need to make some changes right now just to get things under control, is shining a spotlight on exactly who these sorts of cuts harm most. Does that change the way that conversation is going to happen next January?
Well, sure, because people like Kim Dotson are out being great advocates for that community. But look, this is like kind of the new normal. This is not the last time we're going to have a story like this and talk about it around this table, and that's because the Medicaid, we're not reining in, we're not cutting spending. We're reducing explosive increases and trying to lower those. So we go from the whole Medicaid budget, including federal money this year, is $19.5 billion. Next year is 20.7. So if you miss a little bit, that's why when that $1 billion miss, it's like, oh, that's a fraction of a percent of the entire program. It's a giant number if you're writing the budget and trying to fit all this together. But it's showing the face. But that's part of the advocacy piece here, and it's part of what the challenge lawmakers have to look at the entire budget. Because you see Kim and the population she represents and serves. Now I got a line of school superintendents out the door who need half the budget. They need 50 cents every dollar we're bringing in, and that's really the challenge and that's why a guy like Rod Bray's saying, what keeps you up at night? Medicaid spending. Ryan Mishler, all these guys who were not involved in this program before now trying to get control of it.
Do you think Hoosiers are aware yet of how challenging the next state budget, after how many state budgets of, oh, we have more money than we thought. We're spending more and more and more.
We have to pay down our unfunded liability.
Do you think Hoosiers are ready for how tough this budget's going to be?
I think they're going to have to be, because what you're talking about here is rationing. And you're talking about rationing care that is life enabling. And we're supposed to be, or the Republicans are supposed to be, the Right to Life party. These people, many of them may die as a result of not being able to get the access to the care they need. That is something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed, it seems to me, in a compassionate way by the legislature. There may be ways to cut Medicaid that save money or at least stop the growth, but they can't be on the backs of kids who can't breathe and people in the last throes of life. It's inhumane.
Right. The Indianapolis Business Journal reported this week that a compromise earlier this year between Republican lawmakers and the city of Indianapolis will maintain most of downtown Indy's no turn on red signs while removing those closest to the State House. Republican Senator Aaron Freeman, long an opponent of the no turn on red signs, authored a bill this past session to remove all such signs the city had installed throughout downtown last year. But that bill never moved, and the IBJ story reveals that's because of a deal between Mayor Joe Hogstead's administration and the legislature. As part of the compromise, there will be a one-year moratorium on any new signs, and while dozens of signs will remain, 3 of them on intersections adjacent to the State House parking lot used primarily by lawmakers during session will be removed. Oseye, is this a good deal for the city of Indianapolis?
What's the best deal we're going to get right now? So we have to take what we have. It's a very interesting deal. The idea that State House legislators do not want Indianapolis to, which I think I've talked about before on this show, do not want Indianapolis to govern itself. If Senator Freeman has such an issue with how we govern in Indianapolis, he needs to come on back to the City County Council, where he can actually have a voice and a say in Indianapolis politics. It's very interesting where the no turn on red are allowed to be. Well, the signs are allowed to be now. If Indianapolis is saying, our politicians are saying that our constituents say this is unsafe for pedestrians and bicyclists, if the data shows it's unsafe, then what is the issue? Now I think it's just confusing to people. Now people don't know what to do. Do we stop on red? Do we go on red? That's going to be what happens after this. There's probably going to be more accidents now based on the confusion.
Is this a good, you can look at a lot of stuff that happened this session for Indianapolis. You had this conversation, which we learn now is this compromise deal where, the ones that the lawmakers are irked most by will go away. You look at the Blue Line bus route. They're going to get, the city of Indianapolis is going to get most of what it wanted in that. You look at the Downtown Economic Enhancement District tax. They expanded the size of the district, but fewer people are going to be taxed. The people who we're most angry about, the apartments, are left out of that. If you're the city of Indianapolis, are you pretty happy with how?
Get this off the table.
Are you pretty happy with how this session? Are you pretty happy with how this session went?
Oh yeah, and in full disclosure, as a representative of the city at the State House, there was a lot on the table, and it's like get this no turn on red thing out of here, so we can go build a hotel and a soccer stadium and figure out how to pay for local roads. And
I have some no turn on red signs that are driving me crazy in Lebanon, so I was hoping Senator Freeman could come up and see them, because
it sounds like Brian Buchanan needs to be an advocate for you.
It should be a really proud accomplishment he had this year.
Is this a good deal for Indianapolis?
Oh, I think it is. If you're going to, it's petty on the part of Freeman's part, obviously, but at least it accomplishes most of what the city is trying to do, and that's protect pedestrians and crosswalks.
Say that 6 times fast.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, Indiana celebrated a once-in-a-lifetime event this week, a total solar eclipse. Hundreds of thousands of people flooded the state, which was one of only several in the path of totality. Ann DeLaney, what did you think of the eclipse?
I thought it was absolutely amazing. It was absolutely amazing, and it was a great economic development boom for the entire corridor. And I just wondered if somebody were alive in, say, 100 AD, what they thought.
What they would have thought. I had the exact same thought. thought just a few hundred years ago, what the heck is going on?
What is it? What's going on? The end of the world?
There was so much hype leading into this. And I think it exceeded the hype.
I did too. I thought it was way overhyped. I thought seeing everybody at IMS, the 50,000 people that went to the Motor Speedway, our neighborhood was hopping. No one went to work that day. The schools were closed. Everybody's out.
Yeah.
I walked down to. I walked to the grocery store and passed the liquor store, and the parking lot was full at like 11 a.m. everybody had a good time.
Yeah. I mean, I think nowadays we tend to like nothing can meet our expectations, and I think this one was surprising in that it exceeded at least my expectations. It was stunning.
Well, I think it was just seeing nature actually do nature's thing.
Yeah.
And we have no control over this. We're smartphones, everyone thinks we know everything technology. This was something that technology had nothing to do with.
And a communal experience too.
Yeah,
We live in Lawrence, right next to this big
one anyway.
a big community park, and my wife and I were out in the front yard, and when the moment of totality came, the cheer that we could hear from just over the houses, it was just so cool.
Yeah, it was
really
cool.
cool. All right, that's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, Oseye Boyd of Mirror Indy, and Niki Kelly of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The opinions expressed are solely those of the panelists. Indiana Week in Review is a WFYI production in association with Indiana's public broadcasting stations.